Hey, what's up YouTube? I know it's been a really long time, but I've had a lot of things going on IRL, but I did wanted to make this video. I actually made this whole PowerPoint or whatever you want to call this thing when this news post actually hit. So for people who don't know, on March 2nd, what date is it today? March 6th. So it's like 5 days later, 4 days later. So they posted, will Sanctum League go core? Now Sanctum has been without a doubt one of people's favorite mechanics. And it has this nice type of gameplay loop where it has built-in progression with the relics. And then you also get a lot of chase rewards that make you keep wanting to do the Sanctum, like Sanctified Relics, trying to get that original Sin Papyrus Relic, or trying to get some Balance of Terror. And Sanctum was also really good in terms of SSF. If people played the Gauntlet, you know that a lot of people had to do Sanctum, not only to get small currency, but to farm the Internal Damnation, which ended up being a really insane item. Now, GGG previously said before the league even launched that Sanctified Relics and Sanctum would not really be going core. And part of that is Sanctified Relics are extremely OP. And if we actually look at it right here, this Sanctified Relic gives you Intimidate, percent armor, and it also gives you a free anointment, or whatever you want to call it. It's a keystone. So in this case, I have Iron Will, and it does save a lot of points. Now, this is extremely powerful because you could get something like Lethe Shade, or you could get something like Call to Arms, and it's actually build enabling if you actually are able to get what you want. Now, that does have a lot of character power, and I don't think GGG is fine with players having that much permanent player power. Now, however, a lot of people still had some hope before the latest news post. A lot of people thought that because the numbers are actually so great that GGG would actually compromise. Now, one of the biggest things about Sanctum League is definitely the fact that account-bound items now exist. So if you actually look at it right here, this is actually an account-bound item. I think this is the first type of account-bound item that exists in PoE, and it does set us down a slippery slope, because I do think in the future, GGG will probably attribute the success of Sanctum League also to the fact that people have to keep grinding out the league mechanic to get their account-bound item. Now, this is a nice little player graph to showcase exactly how popular Sanctum has been, beating out the likes of the GOAT League known as Ritual. So right here, this is the league concurrent players, and the purple line right here is Ritual. Now, Ritual is probably considered one of the best leagues of all time, where it allowed us to have a new Atlas and also introduce a pseudo-Atlas tree with the Watchstone system. Now, the thing about Sanctum is that it launched at the same time as Dragonflight, so it wasn't super popular right off the bat in terms of the maximum concurrent players, and that's something that a lot of players expected. Now, Sanctum at the start also had a lot of bad reception. A lot of people felt that Sanctum wasn't fair to melee players. They felt that Sanctum was not rewarding enough. And you can see that it did drop a lot, but over time, people started to realize that Sanctum wasn't that bad. And the people who actually quit, or the people who came back from playing WoW, really enjoyed Sanctum. And then you can see here the line definitely levels off to the point that even by the 50-day mark or 60-day mark, Sanctum was actually beating out Ritual League in terms of the total concurrent players, even though the peak concurrent players was much lower than before. And as you can see here, we're already at day 75, 77. And I think this spike right here you see is from the events. So you can definitely see here that Sanctum has blown away most people's expectation. And they do say that they want to integrate Sanctum back into PoE eventually with some improvements. And GGG did really like this mechanic. They felt that it was nice how it challenged Path of Exile players. Now, this brings up the question of what improvements can GGG actually make. So in the post right here, they say, we do really like this mechanic and the way it challenges Path of Exile players. I do think one of the nice parts about Sanctum is how it allows you to play different builds that wouldn't normally be super strong. So for instance, like Shockwave Totem, Spark. Well, Spark is really good overall, but Spark definitely got a lot more playtime this time around because of how good it is in Sanctum. So they do say that they wanted to maybe bring back Sanctum with even more content. I don't know what really that means. Maybe that means there's going to be more rooms, or different types of relics, or different types of boons and whatever the afflictions. And they kind of want to do a general rebalance. I could definitely see them rebalancing some of the relics that give you affliction whenever gives you inspiration whenever you gain affliction. I could see also some rebalancing that makes melee a little bit more friendly, especially when you have low amounts of damage. And the gameplay loop is another thing that GGG are concerned about. They don't want people to feel like you have to specialize into it without feeling like a forced choice. So they don't want us to feel like you have to put Sanctum on your Atlas tree, because without doing Sanctum, you're going to miss out on a bunch of character power from Sanctified Relics. And this does bring us to the question of how do you actually integrate Sanctum into the base game. Now, if you see here, Sanctum is pretty similar to Alva Temple. Now, this is a tier list of the best Alva Temple rooms. Now, for Sanctum, you could do something very similar. So you can encounter Sanctum, and once you find that one Sanctum in the map, it can give you like 4 rooms or 5 rooms or 1 full floor. Now, that is probably very, very overpowered, but that's just one way of doing it, because Sanctum does rely us to put in 32 maps at the moment. And getting a league mechanic where you have to do 32 maps to fully interact with it is probably a little bit too much. So if you see how Alva is done right now, Alva, you actually get 4 rooms per map. So you only need to do, I think, like 3 maps in order to do a full Alva Temple. Now, relics are something that could be integrated in the future. Sanctified relics, I do think, add a lot of character power. However, it does have that chase that allows you to keep doing it and trying to grind out what you really want. And I do think that having account-bound items to the base game is probably not the best idea for the future, because it does make it so that league mechanic is 100% mandatory. So it is going to be interesting to see how GGG approaches this. Now, previous reworks, now this is something that kind of makes me kind of scared. So if you actually read the post more, they say there are a number of improvements we need to make to Sanctum before it can have a permanent place in Path of Exile. So they're basically saying they need to rework it a bunch, and we're working on a lot of stuff for 3.21 at the moment, so we haven't included the Sanctum rework in its scope, but hopefully something we can look forward to in the coming leagues. Now, the problem with this statement is this is something they've said in the past about Ultimatum, and it's also something that's happened with Harvest. Now, if we look at some of the previous reworks of Ultimatum reintroduced the Ultimatum uniques, and there's also that sick Trial Master fight that we can do. You can get Hayforge now. You can also get Mahuzado's, the unique shield. And the problem with Ultimatum is the thing that people enjoyed about Ultimatum with the rewards, the inscribed ultimatums, and having the ability to fight Ultimatum in maps is something that still has not made it back into the game after, I think, like 5 or 6 leagues. And the Harvest rework is something else that they've done. I don't know if people remember how Harvest used to be, but Harvest, you had to build a garden before, and this is actually one of the Google documents of how hard it was to actually build a fully optimized garden. And I don't even think this is the craziest one. There are ones that were even more crazy than the setup. But as you can see here, they overhauled the changes to Harvest, and you have, this is not really the current version of Harvest that we have, but this is the second version of Harvest that we had, that you could see which crafts are available, and you clicked it, and then the harvests were pre-set up, and now you have today's version of Harvest where you just get juice, and then you go to your hoarder crafting station and select what you want to craft. And then we also had the Arch Nemesis rework, which led to the eventual overhaul of rare mods completely, and that was quite a problem for PoE. Now, overall, what do I think about Sanctum not going core? I do think that Sanctum not going core is kind of expected. It's kind of hard to make it go core and also have its chase value still be maintained without the Sanctified Relics. And I do think that GGG really does not want Sanctified Relics to be in the game, because it does allow for too much character power. Now, the main thing to see about this is whether there will be any account-bound items in the future. And something that's a noticeable trend is that GGG has definitely been going away from league mechanics that have made it into the core game without any changes. So as you can see here, Expedition League was pretty much the last league to fully go core without any changes. Scourge League was a complete abomination, and it was actually a disaster outside of the Magic Find Tower meta. Arch Nemesis really never made a core. They kind of added it into the base game in some weird way that ended up being scrapped. Sentinel League could have honestly gone core, but it was not. I don't really know why they didn't make Sentinel League core. I think it would just be too much of a difference from the current base game. Lake of Calandra was just horribly received. And then we have Sanctum, which is another league that did not go core. So all in all, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total league mechanics that did not make a core at all, and Ritual was made core. And this is something that gets brought up a lot, which is that there's getting to be too many league mechanics in PoE. And I do think in the future that rotating league mechanics might be something that GGG does explore, and it would give each season or league a lot more interesting identity. Now, hopefully Sanctum will come back before PoE 2 launch. I am not really too sure whether I would bet if Sanctum would return or not, pretty much because, I mean, look at this statement right here. Not to be negative, but we see the same thing said about Ultimatum, Scourge, Sentinel, and they're all loved leagues, and we would love to see them core. So definitely not going to hold my breath about whether Sanctum is going to go core, but I'm optimistic that it will make a core in some way. I do think that having, having some sort of different mode where your HP is an inspiration resolve is a cool concept, and definitely having a progression-based system outside of just your character's gear and items is something that is incredibly satisfying. But thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know down in the comments below if you like Sanctum League and if you're going to bet on whether Sanctum will get reintroduced into the game before PoE 2. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more mirrors and divines than me, and see you next time. Bye!